What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in the previous video, you guys should have seen we went to the junkyard and we scored a core support for Project Blueberry. It's right here on the floor. I'll show you guys in just a moment why we are swapping out the core support, but I got a lot of comments about making a tutorial video on a core support swap, core support radius support swap, and I just came back from Harbor Freight to grab some rotary spot weld cutter. This is what I use to do all my spot weld cutting. You don't have to go super fancy. This was $5 each, and I got two. Two makes it 4 because they are flippable, double-sided. They are double-sided, so if you break the teeth off one side, you can just flip it and use the other end. So this right here, $10, you get 4 spot weld drill bit. This little pin right here, you drill it into the spot weld to kind of align this spot weld cutter to ensure that you cut the spot weld out perfectly instead of letting it run off. But this doesn't work really well and it dulls off pretty quickly. So in this job, you're going to either need a hole punch. This is a spring-loaded one. You can hear it. Shout out to one of you guys. You sent it to the P.O. box and I've been using it since. I do truly appreciate it. If you guys want to ensure that your spot weld drill bit is going to cut super straight, you can use a really small drill bit. I just grabbed a 3/32 from Harbor Freight as well too, and there's a bunch of them because I know they're probably going to break, but I'm just going to use this to drill the spot weld all the way through, so that way this pin would sit in the hole and guide this cutter to cut the spot weld perfectly. Really don't want to spend too much time yapping, so let's show you guys the core support. So if you look at this core support, somebody modified it to push a full-size radiator further up front, and it's missing about 1.5 inches maybe or so all the way across. Now I was okay with it, like whatever, but I noticed that the bottom support is kind of kicked in. Do you guys see that, how it's kicked in? So this definitely hit something, and I really don't like the way it looks. And you can see the tow hook took some damages as well too, because they're not supposed to be pointing this way. It's supposed to be pointing straight to the ground. So if you look over here, you can see all the headlight bucket area is cut up as well too. Not entirely sure why, but yeah, this race support is pretty hacked up, and I figured since we are going to be working in the engine bay, I want to swap it out as well too. So we went to the junkyard and we scored this crazy clean radius support from a sedan. If there are purists out there, let me know in the comments down below if the sedan radius support is the same as the hatch and the coupe. As far as all the threads I found on Google and Honda Tech, the OG forums, they are the same. But one of my friends, Mike, said they were completely different. And as far as I can see from here, comparing it to the one in the car, I did it the other day, it looks the same. But nonetheless, I'm gonna take you guys through the entire process of mocking it first and then seeing if everything lines up before welding it. So let's get to work. What in tarnation is this? You're already doing all the work. Why can't you just do the extra step of putting this on correctly? So I just pulled the entire front end off the car, and I'm seeing a lot of wirings that are chopped and modified, even though this car doesn't have a wire tuck. So I'm gonna have to like figure out the schematics for this car just so I can figure out what the functions are of these and you know, repair them obviously. But I am gonna do a wire tuck eventually, but I'm probably gonna have to do all that after the bay and everything's all said and done. If you look over here, a lot of modified parts, non-OEM wiring, so this is definitely going to be a nightmare. I've only done EG maybe twice in my life, but they were complete, so I knew all the functions already. These don't have plugs to it, so I'm gonna have to trace some wiring. But if you look at the core support, bumper is off. You can see the bottom is kind of like bowed up, and it looked like it hit something pretty good. So that's pushed back, this is pushed up, and obviously the radiator support is cut on the top for a giant radiator, and the tow hooks are messed up. I'm glad that I left these on there when I pulled it from the junkyard. So right now I'm gonna go ahead and clean up this real quick, but I am going to show you guys the process of the spot weld drill bit on the junkyard core support, because one, it's white, it's easier to see, and two, it's elevated, so it's easier for me to sit there and crouch down. Probably gonna put this car in jack stands, but let's get to it. Now, if you got a core support from the junkyard, obviously you can flip this thing around to figure out where all the spot welds are at. So if you look at the frame rail, this section here is this portion there, and you can look on the back side and see how many spot welds there are. So if you look right here from the bottom, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right here on the top, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and there may be some hidden spots like up here or something, but it doesn't seem like it is. And coming off to the side here, because we don't need these ends, you can see through the paint, there's one there, and let me see, there's a section here, and doesn't seem like it connects to the radiator support. And then coming up to the fender well area, there looks to be two, one right here where my thumb is at, and then one right there. So normally it's identical on the other side, so it's simple enough. You just drill it out, right? And then if it's still holding on, obviously it's held on by another spot weld or something, so you'll figure it out as you go. But what I'm going to do right now is I am going to use my wire wheel to kind of expose all the spot welds a little bit more, and you can use a permanent marker and just dab the ones that you know you have to drill out. I'm just going to go ahead and wire wheel all of this. This needs to be bare metal anyways, because you have to have bare metal to weld it. There are two inside here that I'm just going to go ahead and mark, and I'm just going to mark the outside as well too. So some of these have two layers. Like this is a separate support piece that is welded onto the support, and then it's welded onto the rail. So you're going to have to drill this one a little bit deeper. This here, just going to go ahead and run through it. I'm gonna have to double check this one. I'm not sure. I know there was one right here, so I'm gonna have to wire that one down. That one, this one, and that one. With this drill bit, you don't have to drill it all the way through. You just got to make a good enough crater, so that way the spot weld cutter doesn't walk. And there that goes. Now we're going to use the Harbor Freight spot weld cutter on the drill. Funny story, when I did a right-hand drive for my buddy's car in 2015, I was using the electric drill on the cord, and when I was drilling out the spot weld on the right-hand drive firewall, the head of the drill caught my glove and twisted my finger and broke this finger. So if you look, you can't even see it, but it doesn't sit straight. Every time I use a spot weld cutter, it just reminds me of that night. I'm gonna show you guys these first few right here before I just go ahead and put it on the laps. But when I use these drill bits, I don't force it down all the way until it fully cuts. I always chop it a little at a time, and what I mean by that is watch the motion of how I do this. Okay, so let's start over here. So notice how I'm not forcing it all the way down until it fully cuts. I'm doing it a little at a time just so that the cutter creates that perfect circle to guide this cutter to make a perfect cut through the spot weld. Because if you don't do that, all it's going to do is just want to keep running all over the place. And with the help of those pre-drill holes, it keeps the spot weld cutter in place. You see how the spot weld keeps running? I didn't drill this hole deep enough, and this tip is already super dulled out because of heat friction, and this thing does not stand straight. So I just got all of the left side drilled out. You can see not all the way through because you don't necessarily have to, but there are some tricky areas that I mentioned with the double layer. So this might be a little tricky to separate because you don't know if it went all the way through or not. But for the most part, if you drilled it out perfectly, you can see this part already fell off by itself. 2 on the bottom here, 2 on the top there, and this one right here. So it already started separating, but this is going to be tricky to remove the bulkhead because of the double layer. So you can use one of those spreaders, those metal spreaders. You can slide in there and just hit it with a hammer to chop off the thin metal that's probably still attached. I don't have it, I forgot to buy it, but I'm going to use my chisel, and I'm just going to chisel through to try to separate this piece from the core support. Bam! So we have the left side completely torn apart, and it is looking really good. Now when you have multiple metals that are spot welded together, when you drill it through, it's going to separate. Okay, it's going to separate. And what helps me get this nice and flat when I throw it on the car is I use self-tapping screws just to compress it together, make it nice and flat as possible, then weld it in. So again, I have the backside rails taken off, and I am going to clean all of this up, and then I'm going to use some weld through primer before throwing this onto the car. So right now I'm going to go ahead and just knock this side out, and then we'll get to the radiator support that's on the car. All right guys, so we got the core support removed, and this thing came off a lot easier than I thought. But then again, while I was drilling everything out, I noticed that the top of the support had been swapped out before. The reason why I say that is because I couldn't figure out where the spot welds were at over here, and it seemed that it had been welded before and then grinded flat. So if you look, a little rust spot that had been drilled out before. So as I was going along, coming down here, I noticed that the top section of the radiator support had a bunch of seam sealer. So if you look, there's seam sealer all the way across. And while I was drilling this out, I was kind of pulling on this to kind of separate it, and then it actually separated here. So then when I looked underneath, I realized there's a bunch of booger welds down there. And then I looked across, sure enough, same thing. Again, if you look in this corner here, you can see all that seam sealer, and this section underneath is actually missing. It was cut out, but you can see clearly there's a bunch of seam sealer that they globbed on it to try to cover up whatever they cut off. And it's a good thing that I decided I'm going to change this whole entire thing, because this thing is a hack job. I'm going to go ahead and just put this off to the side. I am going to chop this up entirely so I can fit it into my scrap bin, because that's all scrap metal. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take the white support and I'm going to mock it up onto the car and then align the whole entire front end before fully welding it up. But we're not going to fully weld it up by the time this video ends, because I want to sand down the entire support and also have it off the car so I can walk in and out easily, to remove everything here and to sand the entire engine bay to get it prepped for paint. So I'm gonna go ahead and just get my flap disc, and I'm gonna sand down all of these excess metal from the spot weld cut and get these nice and flat, so that way the support can sit flush on here. So guys, I am running out of daylight right now, per usual, and I'm really just trying to plow through this. So what I'm going to use to hold the radiator support up is two 12 millimeters and two 10s. The two 10 is for the fender area, which is this tab here, and then the two 12 are going to hold the center where the bumper support typically would be sitting. I'm going to go ahead and just set you guys up here, and you guys can see how I go about putting the radiator support on and aligning. Don't forget the little bump stops. This will help align the hood to the fenders. First, I'm going to check to make sure the hood latches. And it does. The hood to the fender gap is pretty low, so I'm going to adjust the bump stop to bring the hood a little higher to line up with the fender. Looking much better. So we know the hood latches. Now I'm going to go ahead and align the gaps to the hood and the fender, and then the fender to the rear door. Alright, that looks good. Really good. What I do notice is that the front end is DOT parts, and they are not OEM, so they don't fit like OEM. So if you look over here, we have a gap in the rear, but when it comes to the front, it actually overlaps with the hood. So what that means is I'm gonna have to manipulate this fender mounting point to bring the fender out more. And how I do that is we drill out the hole for the fender, so that way we have more adjustability to bring the fender out. Just gonna use my step drill bit. Just kind of oval it out a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall, put the 10 mil back on, pull the fender all the way out. I did look at the gap in the back and the fender needs to go in, so I'm gonna do just that. Secure that. Looks good. So right now I'm gonna go ahead and just toss the headlights on, and then I'm gonna test fit the bumper to make sure everything looks good, and then we'll talk about the whole welding the radiator support back in. Okay guys, so we have the headlights on. We have one corner lamp because I don't have the other one. I have clear corners on the way. I have the bumper on as well too, and it is secured to the radiator support in the middle there. You can see on the side here, the bumper gap to fender is looking really good. It is just zip tied because there is no bracketry on the back side. I have it in the storage, I just haven't gone to get it. The corner lamp is not fully secured, so there is a little gap there, but once the bracketry is in place, it'll suck the fender and the bumper in a little bit, and you can see the gap does kind of close a little bit there, right? So I'm not worried about it. The hood gap to bumper is decent. Granted, this is a DOT hood and it is super heavy. It's not fully lined up to the bumper itself, but the good part is it is actually even across, so it doesn't really bother me. Maybe I need to take off the 10 mil and suck the bumper in a little bit more. I will tweak with it in just a moment. The headlight to the bumper looking good. Same on the other side, and this side also no bracketry, so it's just held on by a zip tie. So now that we've verified that the radiator support fits and where it currently sits aligns everything as close as I can get it and is looking really good, this is where you take the bumper off and start welding the front support before removing everything else on the top to weld it all into place. So I'm gonna go ahead and just tweak with this a little bit more, and then we'll pull the bumper off and kind of talk a little bit more just so you guys can see. So let's get to it. So we have the bumper taken back off right here on the table, and obviously we had the whole front end lined up already, and I only took off the bumper, so I didn't alter the radiator support, I didn't alter the fenders or the hood or the headlights. So you can see 12mm bolt hole there, and then there's one on the other side. There's supposed to be two, but one on each side will hold up the support perfectly fine. So again, once everything is all nice and aligned, you can start by welding the rail part before moving your way up. So simple enough, you can use self-tapping screws to close up the gaps, like right here. You can see there's a gap there. I wasn't worried about getting the bottom flush. I was more concerned about the top because the headlights bolt to it, the bumper bolts to the top of the support, so does the hood and the fender. So once you get that all nice and aligned, the bottom doesn't really matter. So again, self-tapping screws to close up the gap, or you can use a vice grip and just clamp it really tight and then start welding in the spot welds one by one. You guys saw I use weld through primer for the back side of the support and the rails, just so that the exposed metal are protected, and because it is a weld through primer, you can weld literally through the primer. It's self-explanatory, right? So I'm not going to weld this radiator support just now because I mentioned before that this is going to come back off because I want to prep this whole thing entirely, and also just having access to walking through the engine bay to prep the entire engine bay and support for paint. So you guys already get the gist. Just weld it here and then take off the headlight, work your way up, weld all those spot welds nice and shut, and then proceed to continue doing whatever you're trying to do, whether it's painting the bay or putting the entire front end back together. I've used flux core before, never had an issue. I even used flux core on my cousin's right hand drive. As long as you penetrate the back metal before fusing into the outer metal, it should hold up perfectly fine. I have a MIG welder, so I'm just gonna use my MIG welder. It helps a lot with the gas, but don't get discouraged if you don't have a MIG welder. I've learned on a flux core for about 7 years before I got my MIG machine, so it'll do the job. So I am gonna wrap up the video right here, guys. I read the comments. You guys wanted to see how to use a spot weld drill bit and how to remove the old core support and install the new one. It's a simple process. It just takes a lot of time, especially all the drilling part of it, but also identifying all of the spot welds that needs to be removed and not removing the one that doesn't need to be. I've done it before where I've drilled out spot welds that didn't need to be cut out. You guys already know I hate working in the dark as well as showing you guys stuff in the dark. So I am gonna wrap up the video right here. I hope you guys enjoy the progress update on Project Blueberry. I'm super stoked. Progress is better than no progress, and we are headed in the right direction. If you guys enjoyed it, be sure to leave a thumbs up. And if you guys wanna stick around for the base stuff, because I think the next thing here is to sand down everything in prep of paint, be sure to hit the subscribe button. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.